Hey folks, Diana Wu David here. I am doing the second of the Future Proofing in Scary Times series. The first was on visualizing the future, and this is the Future Proof Lab attempt to give back a little bit to the businesses that are struggling right now. And this particular next 10 minutes is a 10-minute recap from the Facebook Live for the second series we did. So I hope you find it useful. We'll present these and key takeaways and invite you to share it with your teammates or your friends who might find it useful. So today is all about discovery-driven planning. This is something that my former business school professor, Rita McGrath, had first talked about in 1995. And it really is a different way to plan. So at that time, strategic planning was, a 10-year plan that you had the luxury of time to think about and to marshal the resources to execute that plan. And there was a turning point, and I think that, really what discovery-driven planning is a low-cost process for testing your assumptions about what works, obtaining feedback and new information, and trying to minimize the risks as you go forward. So that's a very basic view of it. For those of you who are in startups, you might have heard of it as lean startup method, which came later and we'll talk about in digitization. So why would we do this? And why in particular now? I think that this is a really helpful way to do planning at a time when we are in an era, maybe not an era, maybe just a couple of months of disruption based on COVID. And frankly, we will be in for a couple more months as the news rolls out, greatest economic disruption since the Great Depression, et cetera. So why is this good? It's good for planning new ventures and markets or new products. And I think that right now we're often in a position where we need to pivot to do some completely new thing because our businesses, as we once knew it, is not able to operate with everybody socially distant and working from home and clients not coming in and people not coming to events, etc. It's useful to envision what is unknown or unplanned, which is right now, but it could be as you enter into new markets or you try to think about product extensions. And it's really focused on testing assumptions. That's the key. So some of the common errors that we make that discovery-driven planning hopes to mitigate, the risks that we're trying to mitigate, is that we have no data, but we proceed as though all of our assumptions are fact. This is human nature, I think, and I know that I've started businesses based on assumptions without that kind of iteration, and it's really useful to do some of this planning in order to really test your assumptions and not have not get really far down the line and realize that you've invested many more resources and time than necessary. The second is that companies have data but fail to see the implications. Euro Disney was like this. They had lots of data. Most of the measurement was about how many people came to the park, but they failed to see and recognize the implications of the fact that they were lowering the price in order to get people into the park. So it wasn't very profitable, but they felt like it was successful. The third is that you overestimate your implementation ability. Hopefully by having something that's iterative, you can start to plan and pivot your plans to see whether or not your assumptions about how much resource, how much time, how much cost would need to go into this venture in order for it to be successful, and whether or not, frankly, it's worth the cost. And then finally, for static environment myth, right? I don't need to sell this to anybody at this point in time because I think it's fair to say that the environment is incredibly in flux. So what are the basics of discovery-based planning? The number one is a reverse income statement. 2 is having an operational plan. 3 is a key assumptions list, and 4 is a milestone planning chart. So we'll go into those in more detail. The reverse income statement is really the basic economics of the business. This is not a full-blown 10-year plan with all the financials and return on investment per se. It's really starting with required profits. So building up from what are some of the minimum allowable costs, and what kind of revenues would be necessary to cover those costs and give an additional margin. And then start to ask yourself as you go into that, does it deliver greater profitability than your existing business? And does it materially impact your business? So if I'm going to all of a sudden decide to launch a coaching business, and that's going to take a certain amount of time, in addition to my online courses, then is it going to be more profitable? Well, it's something that's hard to say. Is it going to be material to my business? Well, given the bandwidth that I have now, maybe not, not relative to online courses. So I may decide just not to do that, or it could be something that that we try to test our assumptions and then find out that in fact people are willing to pay millions of dollars to spend an hour with me, and I will just pivot to coaching. The second aspect is really the operational plan. So the operations plan is looking at those allowable costs. So those are all the activities required to produce, sell, service, and deliver. And thinking about how you use existing assets, and sometimes in this moment of COVID, it's existing assets that are not being used because your business is changed. How can you use those and existing relationships to deliver this new product or service? What kind of edge will you have? Where will you excel versus the competition? Either to allow you to reduce the cost that you have or to deliver in a better way. And that will be an operational plan that you can test. The third is the key assumptions list, which is really what needs to go right in order for this venture to succeed. And this is something you can start with a big brainstorm about and then narrow it down. And as you go forward, you will need to flag and discuss and check these off the list. And reasonable disagreement that will trigger a discussion and adjustment of these is the goal. It is not to see that your assumptions are all right. If so, great. This is probably not even the right planning for you. But if your goal is to check them and maybe adjust, then this is a great list to have as you go forward. 4 is the milestone planning chart. And this is about, not just about, step 1, we roll out the website. Step 2, we buy a bunch of Facebook ads. It's really about which assumptions should be tested at which milestone. So if my assumption is that people will pay lots of money for coaching, then that will be one of the milestones. Or we've talked a lot on the Facebook seminar about the different ways that people are testing. One of them might be, you see this a lot right now, whether or not people will pay for attending an event virtually. And in fact, in the time when I was at Financial Times and we were transitioning to digital, the question was very much, will people pay to read content online? Will people pay, and how much to advertise online? So there are a lot of assumptions in terms of the things that you decide to roll out. And it's very important to have the assumptions that build upon each other. So you can see this, in things like, for example, minimum viable product or product launches. The idea is that the evidence of that step will allow the risk of taking the next step. When I launched Future Proof course, the I just put up a web page. And then I figured if people signed up, then that was the assumption that it would be interesting at all based on how I marketed it, would be proved valid. And I would also get a sense of who the people were who might come to sign up for that course. Once that was proved valid, I decided to actually go to the next step, which was to create the course, and then start iterating from there. So systematically revisiting some key assumptions. This might include your pricing, the package of goods that you put together, especially if you have your legacy business plus some kind of new business or service. The value or the job to be done. Clayton Christensen from Harvard Business School talked about the fact that it's not the product that you're selling, it's the job that you're doing for your customer. The cost to produce is an assumption to revisit. How you distribute is an assumption to revisit. Customer demand, and finally market share. If you have an idea that this will be the only thing in the market, is that true? And how does that impact? And the nice thing about this is that learning to spot when you're making unstated assumptions is really useful. It's useful as you go forward in your business. So a word about digital, because in this moment when we're dealing with working from home, with coronavirus, with people all socially distant, isolated, this is a moment when your business, if it hasn't already, it needs to go digital. And for those of us who thought we were all digital, we need to go more digital. So I just wanted to specifically talk about some of the opportunities. First of all, in this moment, you've probably already looked at some of the problems in your business. The fact that maybe you're not using cloud software to make it easily accessible for your staff to get online and do their work. Some of these problems are, the opportunity really is momentum to overcome them. This is a time when you can, legitimately say, okay, we really need to work on what processes have been problematic in the past, what vendors might have been an issue in the past, that we can use automation to really change. One of them, it might be like your email list and scrubbing your data. It might be your email automation, which all of a sudden you need because you don't have somebody who's in the past may have been calling people to welcome them. Identify new metrics for progress. So in the past, it might have been number of people who attended an event because you could sell to those people and then they became clients. It could be retention rather than new people because you really have to focus on loving the customers you have right now. The other one is considering collaboration. In this moment, you can really think about new ways to partner with people. Everybody is in the same boat. Yes, there's competition, but are there people who are already doing some of what you want to do that you can combine assets or combine and collaborate with to reach either the same audience in new ways or new audiences with your product? And then the last one is the same as always. Test, test, test. Take small imperfect actions forward. God knows you can see me doing that on Facebook Live, which I'm not terribly good at. But the nice thing is for your entire teams and for yourself is that it's developing capabilities as you go along. So it's really learning by doing. So some of the examples that we talked about, many more when we had a full 45 minutes together. One of them was somebody I knew as somebody who's a best-selling author. Now I know all these other people who do that. This is somebody who has been affiliated with Singularity, which is a very super futuristic high-tech institute that's waiting for the time when humans and robots come together as one. So he has in the past been paid sort of $30,000 to speak all over the world and has had a huge income from that and writing books. And he, in the blink of an eye, saw that evaporate. So has had to pivot to doing video like this, but likewise to thinking about collaborating and convening some of the people in his circle, and really coming together for conversations that can allow him to write his next book, and having interesting conversations, and even monetize that, monetizing the convening power and the facilitation, as opposed to just the broadcast aspect of speaking at a big event. Another one is being a fashion forward business. There's a business that relies on people to come in and to oftentimes in parties, they market to corporates quite a lot, and people will come in and get educated on fashion, and they will sell their clothes via that venue. They have shifted to doing these kind of things on video, on Zoom. So you can have a sort of virtual fashion party, and they can send clothes, and everybody can get on at the same time, and still be having that kind of community aspect, and they still see sales increase because of that community aspect, and maybe even more so because nobody can go out to a store. So that is some of the examples that I have to share, and I'm sure there's others that are interesting in the world. There's quite a lot going on in the large corporates, but I'm finding that some of the people who are interested in this that don't have the capacity are really the smaller or medium-sized enterprises. So those are some of the pivots that they're making. So I hope that this was helpful. I'm trying to make it quick and snappy. You know who I am, and you know where to reach me. So please feel free to give me feedback on the session, and feel free to reach out and let me know if there's anything that I can do for your business, because I think that this is a time when anything that I can give that can help us sustain through this difficult period will ultimately make this whole community that we have bigger and better. And I'm sure that there will be karmic rebounds. So I hope that that's useful, and I will see you in the next session. Bye.